Dundas Games, haha!
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Gin here with another League of Legends champion guide for you. Today we're discussing Caitlyn, the Sheriff of Piltover, because what we need around here is some decency, some law and order, and why not a collection of hats that would make the Mad Hatter jealous to boot? Join me now, and let's learn how to Caitlyn. Caitlyn is a marksman in the most traditional sense. The vast majority of her damage comes from her basic attacks, and you probably won't be using many of her abilities in combat to weave in more damage. What her abilities do provide is utility, helping her set up fights, escape lockdowns, and poke and destroy targets from long range. As a marksman, you will play her most commonly in the bottom lane, where she is a dominant force in the early game. Being a sniper with a fantastic rifle, Caitlyn has the longest basic attack range in the game, letting her poke her enemies safely when they can't even touch her. Caitlyn's passive is Headshot. Every basic attack generates a stack of headshot for her. Once those stacks are full, her next basic attack will deal bonus physical damage equal to 50% of her attack damage. Against minions and monsters, this bonus damage is tripled. Additionally, because she's a sneaky sniper lady, attacks from the brush will give you twice as many stacks. Attacks against towers won't give you any stacks at all. The number of stacks necessary for a headshot decreases with level, from 7 to start, down to 5 by level 13. What all this means is every few attacks, you effectively get a bonus mini-crit. If you can keep track of your stacks and watch the count, you can be sure to use the headshot on the enemy champions in lane for some powerful harassment. Being in bottom lane means there's a lot of brush for you to sit in as well, letting you use your headshot much more often. If you're in the jungle, for whatever reason, taking red buff for example, make sure you sit in the brush there too. Remember that the bonus damage is tripled versus monsters and minions, effectively giving you 250% damage shots. The Sheriff's Q is Piltover Peacemaker. She extends one long arm of the law to line up a shot, firing a projectile that deals physical damage to all enemies in a line. Each target after the first takes 10% less damage, down to a minimum of 50%. Lining up the shot takes a bit of time though, a full second's casting time before it fires. This makes your Peacemaker difficult to use for harassing enemy champions. It is instead very, very good at clearing out minions. Using this right when they arrive will make it very easy to clean them up quickly. If you do want to use it for harass, try to fire it from the bushes. They won't see you prepping the attack and therefore won't have the time to dodge. It's much stronger in the early game, as once you have some items, it's often better to just be using basic attacks. In the time it takes you to cast the spell, you could have fired 3 regular shots in the late game. It's Caitlyn's only basic damage spell, and a great form of wave clear. You'll want to take this at level 1 and max it out first while it's still useful. Caitlyn's W is Yordle's Snap Trap. They're pesky little troublemakers, and she knows just how to catch them. Cupcakes! On activation, she sets a visible trap which takes a brief moment to arm itself. Enemy champions who walk over this trap will detonate it, rooting them in place and dealing magic damage to them over 1.5 seconds. Additionally, being trapped grants true sight of the target for 9 seconds. Caitlyn can create up to 3 traps, each lasting for 4 minutes. If she sets more traps than that, the oldest one will deactivate itself, much like how wards work. Yordle's Snap Trap is a great tool for all occasions, blocking paths to reach you, preventing enemies from escaping, or setting up barriers in teamfights. For the utility, take a point in this one at level 3 or 4, but max it out last, as the only thing that changes is the damage, which is hardly a lot, and the cooldown, which remains longer than you want it to be. You might also take a point in it at level 1 and start setting traps immediately. This can help your jungler a lot if you expect the enemy to start invading. Kate's E fires a 90 caliber net. The net fires in a line, dealing magic damage to and slowing the first target it hits by 50%. I don't know if you've ever fired a gun, but they usually have some knockback. And 90 caliber? That's a lot of knockback. Enough, it would seem, to send Caitlyn flying in the opposite direction. We can use this to our advantage, allowing us to escape enemies with ease. You can even launch yourself over thin walls. What this also means is that the slow is not good for chasing enemies. You can use it to launch yourself closer to them, but if you slow them and then try to chase after, you've probably knocked yourself far enough away that it won't matter. The exception to this is if you're standing against a very thick wall. If Caitlyn can't pass through it, she'll simply stop against it, allowing you to slow the enemy without the drawback. As Caitlyn's premier escape tool, take a point in this one at level 2 and max it out second, as not only does level increase the cooldown, but the duration of the slow as well. Finally, the sniper's ultimate ability, her ace in the hole, is Ace in the Hole. Caitlyn is a sniper after all, and likes to take out targets at long range. While her basic attack range is long, this one is huge. She channels for a second to line up the perfect shot, getting true sight of the target over that duration. If she fails to finish for whatever reason, the spell just goes on a 5-second cooldown. Once completed, she fires a homing projectile toward the target that deals massive physical damage to the first enemy champion it hits. Yes, that's right, it might not hit the intended target. If they're fast enough, the target's allies can dive in the way and take one for the team. This is a powerful targeted spell that can be used not only as a finishing blow, but to incapacitate an enemy before the fight even begins. Take a point in this one every chance you can. As a marksman, your summoner spell should be focused on keeping you alive. They're squishy by nature, and having the time to escape or dish out just a bit more damage is often the turning point in a fight. As such, Flash is an excellent choice as always. Heal is similarly great, giving health, a small speed boost, and even buffing another ally when necessary. Barrier is like a more selfish version of Heal. Cleanse is a fantastic choice if the enemy is sporting a lot of powerful crowd control. Getting locked down is deadly, and this is a great answer. For runes, take attack damage marks, flat armor seals, flat magic resistance glyphs, and 2 attack speed and 1 attack damage quintessence. All of these combined take full advantage of Caitlyn's early game strengths. You could, alternatively, trade the attack damage in for armor penetration. These are much weaker in the early game as they have little bonus with low AD, but once you start buying items for them to affect, they get much stronger. For masteries, I recommend 2190, going for maximum damage in the offense tree and some health and regen and defense to help you win trades. You could also take 2109 instead, so that you get some more movement speed and mana regeneration if her abilities are costing you a lot. Itemizing with Caitlyn is pretty straightforward. After all, we said she is a traditional marksman, and therefore takes the traditional marksman's build. Begin with a Doran's Blade. Your first major weapon of choice is the Mighty Infinity Edge. This will buff up your abilities and your passive as well as your basic attacks, but is of course rather expensive. If you're having trouble getting there, or falling behind your enemy, don't be scared to buy an extra Doran's Blade. Follow the Edge of Infinity with a Phantom Dancer and Last Whisper. You'll usually do those in that order. However, if laning phase is still going on, you might consider getting Last Whisper first. This allows you to get more out of your Q where it's easier to hit with from the brush. Once you're roaming around the map, more mobile team fights are likely to take place, so you'll need both the movement speed and the attack speed to keep up. Additionally, if you're falling behind the enemy, consider taking Static Shiv instead of Phantom Dancer. Its cheap cost will give you weaker stats, but will give you some excellent wave clear, in addition to attack speed, crit chance, and mobility, so that you can catch up. Speaking of mobility, you'll likely want to pick up some Berserker's Greaves somewhere along the way. For one final damage item, grab yourself a Bloodthirster. You might even get the Vampiric Scepter to build into it earlier, so that you have some lifesteal. As a high damage carry, you'll also want to get a defensive item somewhere along the way. Guardian's Angel is the defensive choice, followed closely by Banshee's Veil if the Angel's revival ability is on cooldown. Randuin's is a good alternative if the enemy is heavy on attack damage. Much like Cleanse the Summoner spell, Mercurial Scimitar is a good idea if you need to avoid lots of crowd control, and once you've hit the super late game, you might actually sell your boots and replace them with a Zephyr. It gives you much the same stats and then some, plus tenacity. Lastly, I just want to mention the item Runon's Hurricane. Since it hits multiple targets, you will gain extra stacks of headshot for every enemy hit. It will only apply headshot damage to your main target though. In the right circumstances, you could get a headshot on every other attack. However, I would still advise against it in most cases. Your opponents won't always be close enough together for that passive to matter, and the base stats just aren't efficient. Better to get an item that's reliable all the time. On the other hand, if you really need to clear minions out of your base, or just want to have fun, go nuts! Here's a neat trick for you. So Q takes a while to cast, right? Well, if you want to use it but also need to escape quickly, there's a combo with your E. Cast 90 Caliber Net, and then immediately cast Piltover Peacemaker. If you do it right, Caitlyn will run the animation, casting Q in midair, and fire on landing. Additionally, it will fire from your original spot, not from your new position, so you essentially get your Q without the casting time, and at double range. You'll want to be using that Q very often in the laning phase. Even though it takes a bit to set up, if you know how to lead the target, you can still hit. And, as we mentioned earlier, it's harder for them to notice from a bush. You'll often want to use it in conjunction with your support's snares and stuns. If they can hold them in place, it's easy to hit. And it works similarly with your Yordle snap traps. Normally, setting a trap beneath someone's feet won't work as it takes a moment to arm. However, if someone else, say Tariq for example, stuns them, you can set the trap immediately and it will finish arming just in time for his stun to end. In this way, you can keep a target locked in place far longer than they'd ever want to be, and you probably have them dead. In the laning phase, Caitlyn is really strong. Her huge range lets her hit enemies where they can't even touch her, enough that she can shut down late-game monsters like Kog'Maw and Vayne before they get the chance to start rolling. Push like crazy, not only to force them to play defensively, but so that you can quickly gain a level advantage. Be sure that you and your support are warding in case of ganks. If danger does come for you, you can always use your nets and traps to make your escape. Keep them under their tower as often as you can, harassing with basic attacks and Piltover Peacemaker when possible. With practice, you can find the spots where it's easy to hit your enemies without the tower trying to hit you. In the mid-game, Caitlyn starts to fall off for a bit. Most other carries have some kind of attack speed or active damage boosting ability, where Caitlyn only has her passive. These tend to scale really well with items. In this time frame, if you aren't really far ahead from the early game, you'll want to spend as much time as you can farming up. Once you feel confident that your build is sufficient though, that range starts to come back into play and you become awesome again. In team fights, your job is to stay as far away from the main fight as you can. And with your range in the net, that should be fairly easy. Drop traps where you think they will snare the enemy, and keep using your basic attacks. Don't bother with your Q, as that will usually just detract from your damage output. You can save your ult till the end so that you can clean up a kill faster than you can say
Boom. Headshot.
Alternatively, you might use ace in the hole while everyone is still jockeying for position. If someone squishy steps too far out of line, nail him. A squishy mage like LeBlanc might get blown down to half health or less and forced to flee, giving you a 5v4 instead of a fair fight. Caitlyn is a strong early game marksman. Harass your foes, snipe for range, set your traps, and you'll lead your team to victory. So thanks for watching, everyone. If you've enjoyed this guide, please let me know by hitting the like button. Speak up in the comments below if you have advice or questions. We're all here to learn. Subscribe for future stuff like guides, gameplay, and general silliness. Follow me on Twitch for streams and Twitter and Facebook to see what else is going on. Till next time, I've been Gin, and you've been watching me talk about a video game. So what do you think?
Up for a showdown?
Judge and the jury, unleashing the fury, and you got no need to worry, cause I came to execute all these fools, and like with Maggie and the boys, I don't know no rules. I'm from the old school, Wild Wild West, where if you look at someone cooking for a moment, you take two in the chest. I put you under arrest, but I got no time for prisons. Gotta listen in so long that you think it was Schindler. I got a bullet with your name if you're crossing the river.